They call it hallowed ground now, and maybe that's why I took the job. I always had a fascination with history, especially stories from World War II. That was before I learned what it's really like working as a night security guard at the Pearl Harbor Memorial. I started working there about a year ago, thinking it would be a peaceful gig, a good place for quiet reflection on America's history. The shift was mostly easy. I was required to walk the grounds every few hours, check that the doors were locked, keep people from sneaking in after hours. The park closes to visitors around sunset, and after that, it's just me and the weight of the place, stretching across the silent waters of the harbor. The first few weeks were calm. A strange feeling hung in the air, especially down near the water, but I chalked it up to the power of history. I'd walk the empty pathways under the moonlight, listening to the gentle slap of waves against the dock. Sometimes I'd hear the soft sounds of gulls or the occasional fish jumping, but there was one area I always found myself hurrying past, the section near the USS Arizona Memorial. I don't know why, but I always felt watched there, like someone was waiting just out of sight. Then one night in early December, things started to change. I was walking my usual rounds, flashlight in hand, when I noticed something odd by the USS Arizona Memorial. It was an image that didn't make sense. Two figures, barely visible in the dim light, standing near the water. They were silent, dressed in dark clothes, but there was something strange about their appearance. The figures were almost transparent, flickering like static on an old TV. I blinked hard, thinking I was just tired, but when I looked again, they were gone. I tried to shrug it off, chalking it up to shadows or tricks of the light, but that uneasy feeling stayed with me. The next night, as I passed by the same spot, I heard something, a low, distant hum like the faint drone of engines. I scanned the harbor, seeing nothing but calm water, yet the sound grew louder, vibrating deep in my chest. Then in a blink, the noise stopped and the air turned deathly quiet. I couldn't shake it off, so I started asking around, wondering if any of the other guards had experienced anything strange on their shifts. One guy, Paul, just shook his head and laughed it off. But another guard, Jesse, looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "You haven't been here long enough, have you?" He told me about the echoes, a term the night crew used to describe strange happenings on the grounds. They were memories, he explained, pieces of the past that didn't stay put. Sometimes it was just sounds, distant alarms, shouting voices. Other times, people saw shapes moving through the fog, old uniforms flickering like shadows in the dark. Most guys who saw it, he said, kept quiet and finished their shift, but some couldn't handle it and quit. By then, I knew I was in it for the long haul. I wasn't about to let a few tricks of the light scare me off, so I shrugged it off, said, "We'll see," and went back to my shift. 2 nights later, I was walking along the harbor doing my rounds when I felt the air grow cold, bone-chilling, which was strange for Hawaii. I pulled my jacket closer, but then I heard it. Faint at first, like a whisper carried by the wind, a woman's voice singing. It was soft, haunting like a lullaby, and it sent a shiver down my spine. The voice was coming from the direction of the Arizona Memorial, drifting across the water. I turned and walked toward it, my heart pounding. There was no one in sight, no boats, just the still water and the pale glow of the moon. I stood there, frozen, listening as the voice grew louder, echoing across the harbor. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the singing stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The next night, I was standing by the memorial again, my flashlight casting shadows across the dock, when I saw movement in the water. It looked like a ripple at first, but then I noticed something beneath the surface, a faint glow shimmering in the dark. It looked like oil glinting under the moonlight, but it was more than that. It had a shape, almost like a figure floating just beneath the water. I watched, horrified, as the shape began to rise, slowly breaking the surface. A pale, translucent face emerged, hollow eyes staring blankly at me. I took a step back, heart racing, as more faces appeared, one after another, each one looking more ghostly than the last. They were soldiers, their expressions vacant, their skin as pale as death. They stared at me with unblinking eyes, their faces twisted in silent screams, as if frozen in their final moments. I tried to move, to turn and run, but my legs felt like they were rooted to the spot. The faces began to drift closer, their hollow eyes fixed on me, and I could feel a crushing weight in my chest, like they were reaching out to me, pulling me down. I stumbled back, breaking free from their gaze, and sprinted toward the main office. Inside, I slammed the door and leaned against it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked out the window, expecting to see those ghostly faces staring back at me, but there was nothing, just the calm, empty harbor as if nothing had happened. The rest of the shift passed in a blur, and when morning came I handed in my report, leaving out the part about the ghosts. I didn't want anyone thinking I was crazy. But from that night on, I avoided the memorial, keeping to the other side of the park whenever I could. A few days later, I ran into Jesse again and he gave me a knowing look. "You saw them, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze, and he just nodded back like he understood. "They're not here to scare us," he said after a moment. "They're just stuck, caught in a moment that never ends. It's like they're reliving that day over and over, trapped in a loop they can't escape." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We're just witnesses watching the echoes of the past." I wish I could say that I stopped seeing them after that, but the visions only got worse. I'd see flickers of movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows darting across the water. I'd hear faint voices, cries of panic, the sound of distant explosions, like the echoes of that fateful day still lingered in the air. One night, I was patrolling near the memorial when I heard the distant hum of engines again. I froze, listening as the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like the whole ground was vibrating. Then, out of the darkness, I saw them, ghostly figures in uniform running across the harbor, their faces twisted in terror. They ran past me, their footsteps silent, their eyes wide with fear, as if they were running from something I couldn't see. I watched, paralyzed, as they disappeared into the darkness, their forms fading into mist. Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I whipped around, but there was no one there. Just the empty dock and the quiet lapping of the water. But I could still feel the weight of that hand pressing down on me as if someone was trying to pull me back into the past. I haven't quit yet, though every night I wonder if it will be my last. I still see the faces, still hear the voices, and sometimes when I close my eyes I can feel the weight of that hand pressing down on me, pulling me into the darkness. People visit the memorial during the day, paying their respects, but they don't know what lies beneath the surface. They don't see the faces, don't hear the voices. But I do. And every night I wonder if I'll end up like them, another echo in the darkness, trapped in a moment that never ends.